Hi, my name is Kyle Bergman, and I am the festival director for the Architecture and Design Film Festival. Our home base is in New York, but we take our festival to cities all across um, North America, US, and Canada. So last year, we were really proud to present What It Takes to Make a Home. We showed it in a number of our festivals, and you all are in for a treat tonight. It is a fantastic film and well made, beautifully made by Daniel Schwartz, and it's really thought provoking. And I was really happy to find out when CCA decided that they were going to take their knowledge of making exhibits and use some of that and think about how do they tell stories with films critical to architecture and design. And I think this film is a great example of what can be done. It's a film about um, raising awareness. It's a film about ideas, and they told a really compelling story. And I think what's great about it is that you come out of the film really thinking about some of the challenges of homelessness. So I'm encouraging CCA. I know they are planning to do some other films. Part of this is the first of three films in a series, and we're very excited to see film 2 and film 3. And hopefully CCA continues to make films because it's a great addition to the programming that they do and the work that CCA does. So we're really proud to be involved with that, and I hope you enjoy the film. If you like these kind of films, our festival takes place this year online, and you can find more information about it at adfilmfest.com. This year we have 17 film programs and a number of great Canadian films in the program and films from all over the world. So enjoy the evening and enjoy the film.
Hi, I'm Hannah Strothmann, curatorial researcher at the CCA, and I also worked on the film What It Takes to Make a Home and did preliminary research for the film. And yeah, I was really fascinated somehow and also shocked diving into the theme of homelessness, which could be tackled from so many different sides, I guess, but we kind of chose to look at it through the lens of the urban sphere, the individual experience, and also architecture, I guess, also because we are the CCA somehow, but to then also explain on one hand, or kind of show, not explain the global scale of homelessness, but also the local specifics in a way by contrasting two very different cities, Los Angeles and Vienna, which you will also see, which are very different in their urban scale, in their texture, in their also social policy and societal kind of framing. But both cities, I think, like most global cities in a way, are facing a rising number of people experiencing homelessness. And so to look at how these different urban inhabitants in both kind of contexts are thinking about the issue, or how they feel experiencing homelessness, or how they make their home maybe in ways which we would not necessarily at first define as really being a home. And I think what we really tried, and what also hopefully works well, is that the film raises more questions than it answers by kind of looking through architecture projects at the broad theme of what it takes to make a home, and whether we maybe in the end, and that's what I really take out of the film, should not really question what norms of living and dwelling in the city we kind of learned in our socialization, and who is left out there, and maybe then through that also reconceive how we as a society or as societies in different contexts want to maybe reconceive a city that can be a home for all, hopefully. So yeah, I hope you will enjoy the film, if you can say so, or at least it makes you think, and hopefully lead to good discussions to enjoy.
is this Michael?
Yep.
Yes, hi Michael. Alex here from Vienna calling. How are you?
Well, as a citizen in Los Angeles, anybody encounters homelessness on a daily basis. It's ubiquitous here. It's everywhere. There was a time years ago where homelessness, for the most part, was really contained to the Skid Row neighborhood, but it has become such a pervasive problem in the city.
That it's grown to be very much a full part of the daily life of the city. It doesn't matter where you are, homelessness is present everywhere.
It's hard not to become pessimistic, and I think it's reasonable to feel that way. It's probably one of the greatest dilemmas that we have in the city.
This would be one of my questions. Does something like a network exist where all architects are somehow connected?
There isn't really one.
It's going to be a long-term. It's going to be a long-term engagement.
The tent, you're at two angles. You're at a 15-degree angle that's going slanted down, and you're also going slanting that way. If you try to compensate in one area, it creates another problem in the other area. You don't realize that at first because you want to try to carry this problem, but then you got this problem. Now, we're talking about the wind. The winds are heavy here. Everybody's got their tarp up over this fence, and these tarps, when the sun hits them, these tarps get extremely hot. That plastic, you can't put your hand on it, that's how hot it is. So what I do is I get cardboard, and now cardboard is a great insulator. I didn't know that, but I found out about it. But, here's the but. I put rocks on top of the cardboard in the area of the wind. But now, these tents are only little poles that are like bent. They're not meant for rocks to be sitting on top of your tent. And so, consequently, I'm sinking. My tent is collapsing all the time. So what I do is I got to build something inside the tent to compensate for those shifty poles. Also, I tie off the poles along the fence line. I tie the poles to the fence. See, that reinforces it too. But then I got another problem. See, the engineering problem. And I am not an engineer, but I'm trying to make things work.
Yeah, things have gotten rougher and harder last years. Prices of housing went up. Finally, a little bit of raise in pay in work, but it's hard to find work because now they're all snatched up. I have pretty good trades. I'm actually a welder, and I'm also an underwater welder. I build offshore oil rigs. If I find work, I can pretty much be able to afford somewhere, but it's not too many places that, that's affordable around here.
Home is really complicated because it means a lot of things for me. I really feel that I have been able to find solace in community, the people that make me feel safe. I've never felt safe in a place that's enclosed by four walls. And I've never felt like that has been safety, If anything, I feel like a rectangle space, like a rectangle that defines a space as home, has more defined a space where violence occurs, where displacement occurs. So I've had to learn how to cope with this idea that the navigation of going from one space to the next has been home. Home to me can be my car, as long as, I feel that I can, like I said, feel safe in here, then I can make anything my home. But
The crisis is so significant
that, of course, it makes sense to try to get people into better housing situations as quickly as possible, whether that's just providing a safe zone that they can drive their car and stay in their car, or to provide tents on the street, or maybe even stack containers for people to live in as quickly as possible. It's very hard to argue against that.
On the other hand, it's very difficult to imagine that as a positive long-term solution. And that's a place that I think architects have a real role.
I can imagine why someone who is living here is living here, because it's somehow protected. It's close to the water. I like to be at the water side. You can wash there your clothes and your face. And yeah, for me right now, 2 people are living over there, but it used to be even more. And there are another spaces, but they are more protected. We could now probably see that in the next 5 minutes, some officials come, put everything into the litter can, and then the home is gone for the next night. But then the next night, they will start again. this is not a situation where I would like to live in. Yeah? I would like to live in here. Maybe I'm okay also with the 10 degrees minus, but it's not okay. I wouldn't be comfortable with knowing that every second someone could come and change my life upside down. Maybe here architecture is not able to do quite a lot because we have a wall, we have a roof, we have a terrace, we have stairs up. So a lot of things architects deliver we do have here, but the idea not to have the right to be here. So maybe we and the town could allow them, we could do a proposal and the town, the officials could allow us and them to put the proposal here in forms of built environment, like this is my place and I am allowed to be here, then still he can decide or she can decide to leave or to stay longer. But I would at first like to think about intelligent tools to bring it down here, that everyone can see clearly it's okay that they are here as long as they want.
Zur Obdachlosigkeit können natürlich viele Gründe führen, aber man kann es einmal sagen, dass es sich immer um Verluste handelt. Ob es jetzt der Jobverlust ist, Familienangehörigerverlust, Beziehungsverlust, was auch immer. Es geht immer um Verluste. Und manche geben dann auf, fallen in eine Depression und wenn man halt die Wohnung nicht mehr zahlt, ist man draußen und dann landet man auf der Straße. Ich fordere meine Gäste immer auf, sie sollen diese lächerlichen Hollywood-Bilder vergessen, denn zumeist wollen sich obdachlose Personen nicht als solche präsentieren. Man kann heute in der Straßenbahn bei uns in Wien neben einem Mann im dreiteiligen Anzug mit Krawatte sitzen. Der könnte obdachlos sein und das bedeutet, dass sie sich quasi verstecken.
When people think of architecture and homelessness, they think of shelters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea of shelter is good, trying to get someone off the streets for a day or maybe a week. But the downside is that people almost always return to the street.
I think that's an important thing to put on the table, this idea of, are these for a rarefied special community, or are you really trying to make something that integrates in some way these communities with the rest of the city as a whole.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
There is this stigmatization, and I don't want to have it visible in the design. I hate to do a special kind of architecture for special parts of society. I hate that. But I try to use our design to make it not special so that the stigmatization will not grow any longer if we started to do our work. When we started Wenzerast, it was for homeless people and for students. But the building, it has not only a living community for students or formerly homeless, but also has a workshop. It has language courses, event spaces, and a ground floor restaurant. It's not obvious this is a social project, this is a project for homeless. No, this is just a part of the town, a normal part of the town. Everyone can take part in this project, and behind all that there is this social aspect.
Well, I think in this house integration comes in a lot of forms. Integration in the sense of people who have not always lived in Austria or coming to Austria, being integrated in the life here. And then I think also maybe age-wise, because a lot of people from different generations live together, so I guess the older ones may get integrated in the now life. And yeah, I think integration in the sense of getting familiar with different types of lives in all directions. Like I also got integrated, I think, in lives I would have had nothing to do with otherwise.
We were criticized that we were doing a human experiment here. Students and homeless living together. But this is not about creating something special. The project is about designing a togetherness.
This is the idea.
Well, one of the criticisms I heard often was, why are you building something that's so nice for the homeless community? And what I think is really at stake there is that architecture having a strong aesthetic is a tool to say that homelessness cannot be an anonymous problem.
The aesthetics of architecture set up the dialogue. It's the way that architecture communicates.
The people who are living in this building, they're part of the larger citizenry of the city. And
there's a real quality and value to that community.
That idea that you were talking about, people who are chronically homeless, these people have been on the streets for 5, sometimes 10 years. And because of being, in a sense, out in the public all the time, they had developed these almost psychological shells that created a real inward and apartness. So when we started to work on these projects, one of the goals was to try to find a way for the architecture to promote reconnection to a possible socialization, that they would have the opportunity, almost on their own choice, through the way in which we ask them to move through the building, that they would be put in contact with other individuals in their community with the hope that over time they would be able to start renegotiating that relationship to a larger community or to other individuals. The building opened in 2013, owned and managed by a nonprofit developer called the Skid Row Housing Trust. They had decades of experience building short-term shelters, but they wanted to start making permanent housing where formerly homeless people could live forever. The project, designed modularly, now houses 100 residents with community areas and on-site social services.
I am starving. Cornbread. I haven't been having a permanent house since 2013, and living in the streets, staying in the lobby, sometimes staying in the Greyhound, you know, and sleeping in the parks with my son, and it's hard because you also gotta worry about getting assaulted, you know, getting robbed, and God puts us through trials. And I think in my journey it was one of the most long ones, and I'm grateful, and also I'm grateful for having a second chance in life, because they told me I was not gonna make it.
In a funny way, I think I'm actually more confident that significant change can take place in a city like Los Angeles. That doesn't mean it's inevitable. We may absolutely fail, and there's every reason to believe that we might when you look around at the scale of the problem. But I also know how quickly and how radically this city can change. In a way, I feel like that's the only thing you can act on, because the alternative, which I think is a reality as well, is that you decide that the scale of the problem is just too intractable. It just won't change. And at that point, I don't know, I'm moving to Montana.
Oh yeah. Man, what is the hardest thing? I gotta tell you, man, the hardest thing is that everything takes a huge amount of time. Where before it would just, you got to do something, it takes you an hour or two and you're done. But here it's different. Being homeless like this, you gotta transport everything somewhere, or you gotta, like, washing my clothes takes forever. I gotta pack everything, take it down the laundromat. It's a huge amount of money to do it. A lot of things have taken the wayside being homeless. For me, like, there's always something that needs to be done.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CCA in a virtual way. I'm Giovanna Borazzi, the director of the institution, and before introducing our special guest today, I just would like to ask them what is the part of the movie that resonates with them or they want really to highlight, as we all have seen the movie now, so I think the impressions are clear and fond in our eyes and brain and heart. So I will say, Christina, why you don't start to share some thoughts or impression?
Sure. Thank you so much, Giovanni, for having us here and for allowing us to kind of be here for this exchange to comment on the movie. I was really struck by the discussions of the importance of the social element of these infrastructure that were being built to house homeless, the integration with the students in one case, and this real attention to how it must have been for homeless people to live on the street and to live kind of in this public world, and what that means for how difficult it is to slowly come out and make relations. And that really struck, we had a conversation the other day among us of kind of the way that you might think about, there's an urban theorist who mostly works in Africa, actually, in African cities. His name is Malik Simon, and he talks about people as infrastructure. So in what ways are our social relations part of the infrastructure that we need, along with material infrastructure, to resolve, to think about, to make homelessness less of a problem in our societies?
Thanks a lot, Christina. I think this point of infrastructure and kind of human infrastructure, I'm sure will come again in the conversation. So, Maria, what do you think is kind of valuable take?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, CET, and good day to the global audience. It's there are some scenes that resonate, and that's the very beginning where you have the phone calls and you're having a conversation, and very old-fashioned telephones, office telephones, and it would be difficult to imagine, is this today in this post-pandemic time that we're talking about lives on the streets, or if we place it in the pre-pandemic time, what are the things that we were facing on the streets? And I think that the economy that allowed gentrification to cities like LA or cities like Berlin is the same economy that allows the art world to be a speculative market. And from this point of view, I think it's incredible that this kind of buildings can counterpoint what has been the praxis as until now, and what it could be if could be the norm, and not only the special case, the special architectural case for a certain studio in Vienna or in LA, but what it would be if these buildings could represent the majority of how infrastructures function in the cities.
Thanks a lot, Maria. To this point, again, the question of scale and how we can scale up or take this project as a kind of way of doing, not as an exemplary, but as a one possibility, will be interesting to discuss again further on. But I will just ask Juha what is resonate with him.
Good evening also from Finland, and actually I have been now watching 2 times this movie, and I think that what struck me was, of course, this polarization or the binary opposites of visible and invisible. So this film also, of course, concentrated more on the visible form of homelessness, but actually invisible homelessness, people sleeping temporarily with friends and relatives, that's the major part of homelessness. At least in Finland, that's the biggest category of homelessness. But it doesn't mean that it's so much different from the other forms of homelessness, because it makes people very vulnerable also to different forms of exploitation, for example. And the other thing that I think was important is that if you want to find solutions, sustainable solutions to homelessness, you have to talk to homeless people. You have to ask about their needs, and you have to take into consideration also that they have a lot of resources, they have a lived experience, and especially people who have survived on the streets, living on the streets for several years in some cases. They must have some resources that you can build your life in a better conditions in the future. this just to start the discussion, but
no, thanks a
later
lot.
something more.
Thanks a lot, Jua. In fact, I think was fundamental for us in doing the movie, and especially for Daniel Schwarz, the director, of creating a real space for homeless voice to come out and being also protagonists of the movie. And somehow there was a decision that they will talk about what they were experiencing and will not be us or other more privileged people who will actually address this. Well, maybe we should reveal who all of you are, as you carry a lot of expertise and knowledge about this. So maybe we do the other way around. So Jua, if you want to introduce yourself and also maybe reflect on this question that the title has, that of the movie, that what it takes to make a home. So I'm sure that through your work you reflect about that question.
Well, my name is Juha Kaakinen, and I work as a CAO in a non-profit foundation called Y Foundation in Finland, a foundation that was established already in '85 to end the homelessness of single homeless persons. And the name of the foundation comes from a Finnish word, yksinäinen, which means a single or a lonely person. And this is something that we have been doing since then. I have been working there now since 2013, but I have worked with homelessness already in the 1980s for the city of Helsinki, and also doing some research and evaluations on the issue. And of course, in the foundation, we try to find solutions to homelessness, to find also new housing solutions, different means how you can make a home for homeless people. But of course, it's also related to the issue of affordable social housing, and for that reason, it's a big part of what we are doing is building new affordable social housing. Because the needs, there's only one thing that's common to homeless people, that they lack a home. That's the only common denominator of homeless people. So that's the starting point, that with the thinking of housing first, we first try to provide the home, and then if there's a need for support or other services, that can be also arranged together with our collaborators, other partners that we work together with.
Thanks a lot, Jua. Maria.
Well, my name is Maria Inés Plaza Lazo. I am based in Berlin tonight. I come from Ecuador, and I've been running a street newspaper for, as we say, art and society, wealth and poverty. And it's called Arts of the Working Class. And Arts of the Working Class raises the question about the value of culture, who can provide him or herself or themselves with it, and who defines it. And for this, I've had several encounters with different groups of people. As we say, it's a street newspaper and not necessarily a homeless paper, because the term homelessness, it's also a very tricky one, just the same as what a home shall be. And we face in the network, among the people that we work with, many that do not have a house and have to go every month, every week through different houses, studios. So the precarious conditions in which the majority of creative or art workers, as we would like to address, artists, authors, freelance workers, underpaid or unemployed workers in general, we see people facing different kind of problems, mental, physiognomical and social instabilities, or disabilities that are the motors of how people end up living on the streets, far away from any kind of activity that will include them into a system, as we call society. So in this frame of how marginalization is also being drawn within the system of values, aesthetical, emotional, political values that the arts inherit, for us it's crucial to put in balance what both sides can be and make both sides visible. So the question of visibility, the infrastructure, the human infrastructures that build culture as we want it to be, is what bring us together, not only to social enterprises or nonprofits or amazing people working day and night to help people out, but it also puts us on a level that we want to create a discourse that it's not only built by experts, but also by people that experience these extremes and intensities every day.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Christina.
Hi, thanks. My name is Cristina Cielo. I work in Ecuador. I work for Flaxo, is the Latin American Faculty of Social Sciences. And my work is on urban inequalities. I've worked quite a lot in informal neighborhoods trying to understand how people make homes, and they make them homes in very different ways in Latin America. I've also worked in the Philippines, where my parents are from. When I describe the kind of work I do, my sort of like broad way of describing it is I'm very interested in the subjective dimensions of economic inequalities, which has everything to do with what both Juha and Maria Inés are saying about voice, about how people live, about the arts, about culture. How do people experience and live these structural inequalities? And I think the idea of listening, the idea of, I met Maria Inés, in fact, through colleagues who work with a theater group on Skid Row in Los Angeles, who've been working for many years in kind of this attempt to give voice to homeless, formerly homeless, addicts, former addicts. And what I find, kind of thinking about these comparisons between the global South and the global North, or Latin America, so I'll speak more specifically about, I've worked in Bolivia and I've worked in Ecuador, and the way that, I mean, homelessness is not the same issue. Urban living precarity, housing precarity is an issue, but homelessness is not the same kind of issue, in part because of the way informality works, because of the ways that land values and alternative claims to property are possible in places like peripheral cities like Cochabamba, Bolivia, even in the capital of Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador. And the idea of one more thing, I'm not going to keep going on and on because I'd like to get into the conversation, but the idea that Maria Inés talked about not having experts define the situation of the urban poor. In fact, in Latin America, to say urban poor is very strange. You don't hear people talking about the urban poor, you hear about the urban popular sectors, which is a very different understanding of what these inequalities mean and what people in marginal positions in these structural conditions, what they can claim. And so when I think about housing precarity, I tend to think of it in terms of possible claims that can be made by people who don't own land and who don't own necessarily homes and who self-construct their homes and claim lands. So there's very different dynamics, and I think it's really interesting to hear, kind of to have this conversation across regions, because I think they play out, these kind of dynamics of inequalities, urban inequalities play out very differently in different places.
Christina, thanks a lot. You made such important points, and maybe we should actually continue on this, because I think the question of precarity, as you said, is very connected to the context. So something that might appear precarious here in Montreal might not be at all in Ecuador or in Finland. So how, this question of precarity is also, I think, connected to what Jua also was saying before about this invisible homelessness. So people who are at the risk of ending up in a condition of living in the streets or not even having an address, and so all the consequences of this. So how in your work, I would say, I will start with Christina, but then I will also want maybe Ju and Maria to jump on this, of like how you approach this question of precarity and what it means in your context.
Yeah, I think precarity is, I think you're totally right about how context specific the word might be. And when you live in countries of the global South, where say 60% to 70% in Africa, people work in informal jobs or live in informal housing, and numbers are smaller for informal housing, depending on the place, but in Bolivia, for example, more than 50% of people live in informal housing, don't have titles to housing. So what does precarity mean in a place like that? For me, thinking about sort of voice and sort of this subjective dimension, precarity has so much to do in the Latin American context with the individualization and the kind of the loss of political voice. Mm-hmm. So I tend to think of political precarity when I think of precarity in Latin America. When a whole neighborhood protests to say this is our neighborhood because we've worked to establish it, despite not having titles, there's a certain stability in the collective. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I think about precarity, for me, it has a lot to do with the question of voice and the question of the ability to make claims and to have an effect on the political decisions that affect the way you live. So I think there's very different ways of thinking about precarity, but in Latin America, for me, that's the one that is one that people have to deal with a lot. Is when they don't have this voice, it becomes almost impossible to participate in the public life that decides where you are positioned.
Mm-hmm. And no, this is very clear, and maybe in a northern globe, this is also very much connected to the condition of an homeless who might not have visibility or might not be able to claim a voice and so on. And Jua, I was interesting to understand, the work you do with your foundation is impressive in the scale of, so I think the foundation has now 70,000 apartments that can actually provide for homeless people, so it's an incredible scale. So I just wonder in these terms of precarity, which is also maybe the work that you do to understand, not if there are ways of sense the risk in advance before it's coming, but somehow beside the policy that is very clear that you have on home first and affordable housing, if there are other initiatives that you're doing considering this question of a kind of people at risk or precarity somehow?
Yes, I think that if you think it on a political point of view, you can say that precarity is a kind of form of political control also, because it keeps people alert all the time. But I think that homelessness is in a way the utmost form of precarity. So I think that as we have seen during this COVID time now, there has been in many places some experiments of universal basic income, and even some governments that you could never imagine doing that kind of thing have introduced some kind of universal basic income during this time. But I think that we need a bigger solution, and it should be something like universal basic assets, which includes also the affordable housing as an important element, something that people need us to build their life on. I'm very much focused on working to find solutions, and for that reason, I think that at least in the Finnish society, work is so important means or measure to get integrated into the society. That's something that we try to do even in our foundation. We have around 6,000 flats dedicated to homeless people, 10,000 affordable social housing flats, and we try to provide job opportunities for our tenants. But I think that we also need a new kind of thinking. We normally say that what kind of apartments we have available. We have 1 room with kitchen, 2 room with kitchen. So why couldn't we have 2 rooms with work, 2 rooms and job? That's related to the place that you are living. And this kind of experiments we now try to introduce in the foundation also.
This will be a very interesting thinking where you think of the condition of homelessness not simply or reducing it to a question of space, but all this other aspect. And so somehow you should not provide only a roof and maybe the care related to that, but in fact these other opportunities that are also opportunities to re-engage with society, with a community, and going back to what also Christina was saying at the beginning of a kind of people infrastructure somehow. In a way, Maria, the work you're doing with your publication, your journal, your newspaper is also very much of like trying to tie together these different questions of work and wealth and urban condition at the same time.
Yeah. Yes, to the question of the precarity and what precarity has as an incidence in the discursive and the practical and the daily levels of how we operate as one grain of an entire field of the arts. I like very much what Juha just said about universal basic assets and not only income. It's not only about the monetary value. It's not about having a certain amount of money every month. It's not about only having space, a certain kind of space. It's about having a set of tools to live decently, and this is what it's definitely lacking in the so-called art world. And we are. It's funny because we work on an associative way. We want that every text, every contribution, every artist contribution is not for itself, but it opens an associative field. So that's why every issue of ours has a poetic name. For example, our current issue, it's called Eurozonation. It's about the margins of the European Union, the margins of the Eurasian context that it's very, very much put aside in many ways from general discourses in Europe. And for the upcoming week, we call it The Landlord is Coming, because it's about the state of the state of trade as such, and how everyone is living from paycheck to paycheck in general in the art world. So we just don't know how's 2021 gonna look like. So we are like, it's possible for many of us just to end up on the streets, literally, to lose our spaces, to lose our commissions. So this is something, precarity is it's the term we work against. So there was a term coined by Chris Dercon, who successfully run museums in Germany until he went to the leftist theater Volksbühne in Berlin, and the discourse changed suddenly for him, but about many reasons. But he coined the term precariat. So it's like a proletariat, but it's mirroring the idea of the art worker as such, which for me, the first time that I hear it, I was pretty much in awe. It's like, okay, so are we accepting that this is a synonym, the art worker, as the precariat? So what we want to do is definitely just like erase in its best sense, in the best sense possible, and looking for to build communities, to have the political incidence, the political impact, to have a voice in the city, which is so difficult, right? Just to put you an example, in Berlin, and I just half of a minute, it's the private collectors are pushing the city to lower the rents, lower the price per square meter in the city, while they perfectly know how high the price is per square meter in a city like Berlin, which is around 12 to 16 euros per square meter. Collectors like Gyula Stoschek or Haubox or among others were asking to pay less than 6 euros per square meter. So for me, this is a very grotesque but also very clear idea how interests, how assets are being handled in a very speculative way on an investment level, so people that can afford the investment, while the other side of the rent gap, facing the damages of gentrification, are just literally going more out to the outskirts and living in this kind of conditions.
Yeah, for sure, the pressure on the city and the kind of real estate development and all this kind of, who is also in these moments wants to take an opportunity to make money, we see immediately the consequences. In this sense, I would like to to ask Jua, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this documentary was really to understand the role of architects, that I'm sure they are not the solution in this problem, but somehow we think they can bring certain ideas. But I'm sure that you, Jua, worked also from many architects, but more I will say about the question of scale. Like it's in the documentary we see two buildings, but somehow you are managing a very different scale of thinking. So how much a kind of systemic thinking or policy thinking is actually helping within also working with architects, or like how you advance the ideas in relation to new models, as you were saying now, for example, of this new model you are thinking that is not only spatial.
Well, I think that architects could really do much more on this sector in solving the issue of homelessness. So far, the involvement of architects, which I have seen, they have normally been a very specific small projects. The architecture is important, but they are on a small scale and like the tiny home type solutions. When we know actually that we need a big scale solutions to homelessness. And of course it means that solving homelessness is part of providing good quality, beautiful buildings for people with low incomes. That's the issue. And for that we should have models, types that could be upscaled in many places. And I think that's really important, and that's something that's duly needed at the moment, because architects have so many multiple roles. They have a role in town planning, and they have a role in building designing buildings and apartments, and so they can do a lot. Because I think that also in the homelessness sector, there's a very stereotyped thinking about, we don't think so much what a home is. We think that when we find an apartment for a homeless person, that's the solution. But it has real importance what kind of apartments we have. They have to have also functional beauty, in the sense that it has big importance for homeless people also, because they also have the risk of isolation and loneliness. So the apartment, if it doesn't work, it's like a cage or a cell. So that's something that architects can solve. They can turn design, they can turn a concept like home into physical design. And the home should be something that opens up, so that it's not only the physical premises, it's also the social relations. And so it's important how the building is designed. And I think that the knowledge how to do these things is there. It only needs some effort to build an alliance to make it concrete.
And Christine, I wonder in your work, also you said you're working on often in a kind of informal settings. Do you think there are other, kind of coalitions, let's say, you were speaking of a kind of alliances between, an institution, a foundation like his own, the policy making, the architect, and so on. And in your case, it's like you have been observing other kind of forms of self-organization or self-help or alliances that maybe can also be productive.
Yeah, I tend to think, hearing your question and hearing Juha's sort of way of thinking about the way that different actors have a role in working to improve situations and inequalities that result in homelessness. I tend to think quite structurally. I've done comparisons of precarious housing in Latin America, in Bolivia in particular, and in the Philippines. And it really struck me, Maria Inés at the beginning spoke about Los Angeles and Berlin. And the question of land value, the question of the role of global cities and the investments that they seek to attract, and the way that affects, so how do we put together these very different scales that are happening at the same time, which are somebody looking for a place to be, architects building certain kinds of buildings, urban policies making certain zones affordable, not affordable, and at the same time think about something like the global economy, an attempt of certain cities to position themselves within a global economy that makes land values skyrocket, just as Maria Inés was saying, which makes it incredibly difficult to, unless there's a very strong, Juha and you also, Giovanna, were talking about urban policies, which determine a certain percentage of affordable housing in developments. So how do you counteract a global economy in which investments are sought, particularly in the developing world, particularly in places like Manila? I was working in Manila and I was working in Cochabamba, and Cochabamba's far more peripheral. Manila, because of the attempts to attract global investment, has privatized urban development, which makes it really, really difficult to make any kind of coalition claims to land that you don't own. So homelessness is far, far, far more present in a place like the Philippines than it is in Bolivia, even though both countries have more or less the same average income per capita. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's how do we put together the different actors, coalitions, nonprofits, service industry, architects, urban planners, and national economies that seek investments or that's less important. How do we put these together to kind of try to think of how we organize ourselves as societies to make something like homelessness, precarity of its different forms, precarity in work, to make it less prevalent than it is right now. And it's far too much part of our lives and our societies now.
Yeah, Christina has a fantastic way of putting together this question of the actors and how which is the modality that we put all these elements together. I think Jua and Maria were actually reflecting on what you were saying. So if you want to add anything on this point, please go ahead.
I would like to add straight away. I'm sorry that I just rush first, but I would like to add something about and also to come back to the profiles of people that we saw in the film. So it starts with a veteran living in this bridge and talking about his blue ship in this bridge, and then we have another man that it's also having a certain specific construction, which is very interesting, using this specific place in the city, which is the bridges of LA, and like the pathways for cars, and then to the highways, and then we see a woman talking about her struggles, living in parks, like choosing parks to live with her son, and then being in this very cute kitchen with everything, where she's cooking and serving something for the conversations to have with the camera person behind this, and it brings me to two things, namely what kind of structures or what kind of architecture are we dealing with, for whom is this made, and for the other is also to come back to the not only to the constructions of what architecture can provide or not, is what kind of space do we need. And to be a woman with a small child in the streets is completely different just being by yourself. Being a male person in the streets is completely different, and you see mostly people on the streets living there. It's the majority is, and you don't see as many women or trans women than men on the streets, and I'm being a bit spreaded. Excuse me,
no,
but that brings me also to an article that we published yesterday. That was a fragment from the book that Anne Wag, a journalist and author here in Germany, published, and it's about family constructions in Germany. And there's a chapter that we chose to publish in which she beautifully puts and very clearly puts how apartments today are just not constructed to be shared apartments. Let's say you had a shared flat with a friend, and then you are living there, 3 adults and a newborn. How is this supposed to work? And you can see the problems about intimacy in this kind of construction. It's the same and you can see the same kind of problems with millennials, and there are studies of how intimacy is impossible in spaces that are just too small, and intimacy is just starting and ending in the virtual space because it's not possible anymore in the physical realm. So it's
for sure the question of I think also what Jua was saying before, the question of what are these homes and how we are imagining and just speaking of 1 room, 2 room, and maybe also think for the future of a different composition of also what a family is. Certainly is a crucial issue also in this question of homelessness, where maybe a person has not a kind of support. So, for example, the project in Vienna, what is quite incredible is that are shared apartments, and you have 2 students and a homeless or 2 homeless, previous homeless, and a student, and so this question also of, and there is a very different age also in between the groups, so it's a very interesting models also of thinking how you can also start to think also through that question of homelessness, the question of like multi-generation and issues like this. I think we only have a few seconds still, and there are some questions that people are putting out. But I see Juha, you want to, so please go ahead.
Yes, I totally understand the point about the land ownership and the importance of that. But I think that we already live in a world that nothing is like it used to be. Not even in the world of finance at the moment. So I think that there are still things that can be done. I think it's necessary to regulate the global speculation, and also if the land ownership is an issue. So why just start to collect institutions and actors who could buy the land that's needed for common purpose? Just to throw on the table some practical, pragmatic solutions.
So no, this is very nice, because I think the question of land is crucial in this question of homelessness, and also as Christina put it in this kind of also north and global north and global south. But somehow, who you think that should be, like we started this with saying, the architect, they might have a space in the conversation, but who you think should be around the table to actually continue this conversation in a productive way? And I'm sure the different contexts might suggest different actors, but somehow who you think that needs to convey around this topic to make it more productive for the future? Juha, I'm sure you call a lot of people when you have to implement your projects.
Well, of course, in Finland we have still a strong belief in the government and the state, and the role of the state authorities is still very, very, very important. So for that, at least, it's necessary. But I think that we could think about not only about homelessness, but trying to solve at the same time the other crucial issues that we have on the table, like the climate change. Mm-hmm. How we can make a fair transition to carbon neutrality, and we can combine these things. And then, of course, in the post-COVID world, there's a huge amount of money available for economic recovery. So why not combine all these things? And then it means that we need to have the international institutions that play a key role in the finance world also involved. In Europe, it means the European Union and its, for example, the investment bank, etc. There's money at the moment available that could be directed to mm-hmm. useful ways to help people in vulnerable situations much more effectively than it has been done previously.
Very, very smart position of how we should use this kind of money available in really trying to address these different facets of this crisis as a kind of maybe not one solution, but trying to advance this solution at the same time. Christine and Maria, who you think we are missing from the table?
You want to go ahead, Maria?
No, go for it.
When we think about, particularly when we think about redistributive policies, I think about the last 10 years in South America in particular, with the governments which call themselves, governments of the socialism of the 21st century, with the idea of these redistributive policies and the importance that we found as citizens of these countries that had these very important investments in social issues, in education, in health, that there was a way almost that the public was appropriated by the state. And what that ended up doing was taking away the voice of the marginal people who were being helped. And for me, this moment, it's a really this political moment of having a voice, of setting at the table the people who are being helped, the people that policies are determining their situation, be they the informal workers, be they the popular economy workers that are working on the streets, be they the people who have who are in the marginal positions of sort of the society. They have to be. I mean, Juha started with talking about this, and Maria Ines was talking about it in terms of sort of arts and the voice that arts allows. They have to be at the table. You have to. There are resources that are there in the knowledge, in the experience, in the ways and practices that are already had by people who are constructing their own homes, for example. And that has to be taken into account in order to make, I mean, Juha said it very finely. I mean, it doesn't work if they're not at the table, if they're not part of who's making these decisions.
Yeah. And that's it's the same on the level of parliament, and that's on the level of neighborhoods. And on that all scales, there has to be, again, just to come back maybe just to the words that I tried to propose in the beginning, the experts and the ones that live that reality every day. So it has to be intergenerational, and it has to be also with expats. I mean, we haven't even touched the issue about migration here, and that it's important in every single city that we're sitting here today and tonight. And that's the main thing. I think museums, from the arts field's perspective, museums and cultural institutions have started diversifying actively, and that has to happen in every single aspect of society.
Thanks a lot, and I think we have kind of set a proposed agenda for everyone who is hearing us, of like trying to give tools to or direction or ideas of how to at least start to think differently about this issue of homelessness that is also connected to such a much broader issues, as we said, of precarity, governance, diversity, equity, the issue of migrants now, and so on. We had few questions from the audience that I actually think we have addressed it, even if I didn't read. That was one question was about how homelessness is different in the different city or different culture that you all inhabit. But I think somehow we have given a bit of an answer there. And another question was about if people are defined only by their economic contribution to society, or isn't it and also important to include those who see society from the outside so that they reflect on the mainstream? So somehow probably criticizing the idea of affordability as a way of connecting your wealth, your income to the potentiality that you have. But I think the conversation will continue, as this was just a first start. So I would like to thank all of you who have been following us, and I would like to thank Juha, Maria, and Christine a lot for their inputs and their thought and reflection. That has been extremely important to really enlarge our conversation from the documentary we did and expanding to other context. I will also want to thank Lev Bratishenko, who is the invisible maker of this event, our curator public, and just tell you that this documentary is one of a trilogy. So when I leave you now, you will see a sneak preview of the next one that we were working on, that is about people living alone. So, and the third one will be about elderly. So somehow these three topics we think are very connected and are part of what are the challenges of cities today. So thanks for following us, and thanks a lot, Jua, Christina, and Maria. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Giovanna. It's been a pleasure.
We have about 200,000 years of history collectively living in groups, and about 60 years of living alone. The social change is extraordinary. 22% of Americans were single in 1950. 49% of American adults are single today. 9% of one-person households in 1950. 28% of all households have just one person today. The fastest growing segment of people who live alone are young adults under the age of 35. Now it is an urban condition. Next slide, please. Living alone is more common in Canada and family-centric Japan. It is more common in most of the societies in Europe with which we normally compare ourselves, and it is by far the most common in the Scandinavian countries. In Stockholm, 60% of all households have just one person. Next slide. Our lives are different today than they've been in the past. Living alone is made possible by economic affluence and security. This is the new demographic that for me is the most fascinating. You don't see social changes like this very often. You also can't understand the rise of living alone outside of the communications revolution. Is there anything more innovative than changing the entire way in which we organize our lives and our households?